Wiggle, wiggle, clap, clap, let's go, dap, dap. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another tier list video here on the channel. Something I have not done in a good solid minute, and I figured I'd go back to one of the classics, and that would be asking you all for some of your favorite and least favorite tropes, and ranking them to my own subjective tier list, and of course, every trope can be done well, every trope can be done poorly. This is a general
how it make you feel in your gut when you see the trope developing response.
And without any further ado, I'm pulling from your Twitter responses to my twatter question, what are your favorite and least favorite sci-fi fantasy tropes? Let us begin. The first one I actually read of any of my responses, and the one that I have an immediate gut reaction to of hells yes, would be the fallen or falling empire trope. This is something I think is always a blast when you see it, and even in poor books or just bad stories I don't enjoy, if they have this in it, I'm not upset by it. I'm going to still enjoy that element of it. You can literally just say like, the nation's on the decline. And I'm gonna be like, so for me, this is actually going to be an S tier. We're starting super positive, but we're gonna sink down to something a bit more controversial. In general, the AI gaining sentience trope or becoming like human, developing emotions, morality, things like that is great. But when it's done poorly, I think it's borderline god-awful. I've rarely seen it done poorly, but when people use it in an extremely underdeveloped way or kind of just tossing it to the side, it can be absolutely world-breaking. Basically just assuming that new levels of AI intelligence will have childlike characteristics seems like a very not smart interpretation of that. So I'm going to average it out to a B because it is usually pretty dope. Godlike aliens. I don't know why I chose chiseled, jacked man alien for this, but I saw that and something inside me went, that is godly. Godlike aliens are cool. They fully range from total schlock to well thought out sci-fi concepts. They really are just a broad general strokes element to put into your universe that we often see in sci-fi that usually does not have negative results. I especially love ancient godlike aliens. I mean, then we can start getting into some Lovecraftian territory of storytelling, and that's always fun. That guy though. So I'm gonna leave it into a solid A. Now we have stories within the story, often told by a bard-like character, hence why I picked a bard. This is another pretty solid one, except occasionally it can be pace murdering. I have seen stories come to a grinding halt for a totally unnecessary tangent that the author thought would just add depth to the world, but at the end of the day, it just feels like a story they wanted to shoehorn in here. In general, though, it does more good than harm, and I'll leave that for a solid B. Oh wait, I don't want E and F. That's not how I do my tier list. Get out of here. Bad. I don't want you here. There we go. That's a better reflection of my preferred tier list. B's the middle. A version of the Chosen One trope I like to call Star Child, where they have an innate power inside them that just means they're the greatest thing of all time and are more powerful than anything else in the universe. This was actually put forth by our good buddy Rustage, and he was saying it is one of his least favorite, and I completely agree. I generally hate this, and I think it's extremely lazy. Granted, there are some good executions of this, especially if you add in a lot of consequences and negatives to being a chosen one with extraordinary power, but very often it just feels like, oh, now we're going above and beyond chosen one to super mega chosen one. Lovely. The grizzled older character, the veteran trope. This is one that I just love the shit out of. From Slow Hand to Aragorn, there are so many executions of an older, grizzled, experienced, ranger-esque figure that just comes off delicious. I wouldn't quite put it in S because it's become so common that it gets a little painful at times, but overall, I'm going to enjoy a grizzled veteran. The I can't kill bad guys trope. This really is world dependent for me. There are certainly some times it feels acceptable, or if it's written in a way where it's a real challenge for the hero, I can enjoy it. Although a lot of the times it can feel very unnecessary. You see heroes who are just like, dude, you should kill that guy. They're gonna go murder 80 other people if you don't. And any like sane person in that kind of situation's going to murder that bad guy. But then our hero's like, I can't. It goes against my moral code. So for me personally, this is gonna go to a C. The farm boy trope. Oh my god, what just happened? Did y'all see that? What was that? Oh my god. Oh my god, I did it again. Now, I'm just as big a fantasy fan as the next goblin, but farm boys are getting a little bit tired. It's such a meme now that you got a farm boy between 13 to 20 who's out with an odd parental situation and ends up getting swept up by a wise mentor. Like, it is the cornerstone fantasy initiation. It's like how D&D campaigns begin in a tavern. So I'm going to say it served its purpose, but its time is behind us? Is that a weird thing to say? I don't know. It's C. I respect it. I don't hate it, but ugh. Ancient magical artifact trope of grand power. I just put an artifact on Google image search and this came up. I have no idea what this little tube is. I think this is wonderful. It falls into that grandiose feel that like an all-evil godlike alien race could bring in. This idea of grander powers that used to be at play, and the fact that our heroes now are just dabbling into the surface of the potential down the road. I think it's magnificent, and having literal artifacts left over from a time like that are just scrumptious. So for me, even sci-fi or fantasy, this is an S tier. Laser swords in space! Now, I refuse to spread the lie that Star Wars invented laser swords in space. They did not, but they most certainly have done them the best I've come across in terms of building them into their world and iconically being associated with them. I think they are just badass looking. Like, you cannot deny the fact that aesthetically, despite how impractical it seems to be, a laser sword looks cool. No one's gonna offer a good faith argument against that. I'm gonna put them between B to A because, especially if you're going for a more realistic story, I'm gonna have a problem with people whipping out laser swords when guns exist unless there is a great magical excuse for them actually having such a threat on the battlefield. Specific kinds of armor development can also really work for establishing laser swords necessity, but I do see it as a kind of dangerous storytelling element to bring in. The noble bastard trope. This was mentioned on Twitter as someone's least favorite, and I can see why you wouldn't love this, but I got no hard feeling against it. I think it can add some interesting internal family dynamic, and if it results in the character standing apart from the rest of their family in a way that can be a good excuse for drama or conflict, I think that's fine. So I have nothing against noble bastards, and I'll put him B. The love interest who only exists to be love interest. Oh, what a trope. It is so disgustingly prevalent in things like Hunger Games all the way into Lord of the Rings. There are just people whose entire purpose is to be love interest, and often fridged. It's a sign of underdeveloped stories or writing in my experience. If you're telling a more fairy tale type of narrative, I can see it being more justified, but in today's day and age of sci-fi fantasy, it usually stands out like a sore thumb and is extremely annoying. Though, in a master hand, it can give you some instant stakes. But for me, this is going to be between C to D. The all-evil alien race. Unlike the godlike aliens, these need to be a little less developed. They purely exist to be a threat. They do not have reason or rationality that allows them to be good, and they are all evil. And this person put it as one of their least favorite tropes, but I say nay, sir. I actually really like it if applied in alien horror especially. Things like xenomorphs. They have no purpose but to just murder, be evil. They are natural killers. That's badass. They're a biological weapon. That's evil. And they're an entire race meant for that purpose. So with that one example being one of my favorite alien races of all time, I can't bring this trope too low. And there are other races that are presented as all evil that I also quite enjoy, especially when it comes to like the monolithic space creature that just consumes. It brings this like sentient natural threat into your story. So I know why you don't like it, and I'll meet you in the middle ground and just say B because I think it has a wide range of potential. Flying cities! Flying cities, fantasy or sci-fi, are just cool. Can't think of a single example where I didn't just go, that's cool, I like a flying city, I'm gonna go live in that flying city. It's an instant S tier. I think it's rad. Evil mentor in both sci-fi and fantasy, one of my favorite very common tropes. I also realized at this point how many of these could actually apply to Batman, especially the ones later on we're gonna get into. Batman's a very trope-filled character, but here I pulled Ra's al Ghul as an example of an evil mentor, and I think this is S. It's been done to death, it's often predictable, but it is straight sugar in my body. I love this schlocky stuff, and it works for me. The love triangle. When I was younger, I used to hate on this. It's just because, like, I don't like love triangles. But as I've gotten older, especially, I've really started to enjoy me some love triangles. Even schlocky ones you can make fun of for how bad they can be. So, like, even if I logically, critically know they're stupid sometimes, I can just, I don't know, revel in the ha 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 of it. So for me, it's gonna go A. This is a big turnaround from times of Daniel's past. Your boy's growing up. I've been doing this for so long. Now, this one is super specific, but as soon as I saw someone commented on Twitter, I was like, oh my God, of course. I actually love this one too, and they put it as one of their favorites, and that's multiple POVs coming together at the end of a narrative and meeting up. Oh my God, this is actually great, and one of my favorites when it's done well. Even when it's done poorly though, I still can appreciate like, the team's all here. It's kind of like the build up to the Avengers, but within a book that can fit all these different movies coming together into just one story, because, you know, books have a little bit easier time getting through a lot of material in one book because they're not constrained to like a 2 hour. I'm not getting into that right now. Anyway, you can essentially do an Avengers within one book or series, and it's always pretty cool. I also like using this art for it because it's like two faces being smushed together, and to me that was just funny. I just imagine the author being like, now keys. This is gonna float between an A and an S to me. This is starting to look like a very disorganized tier list. I don't care. The character not born of the 20th century who quips like he's from the 20th century. This is becoming more and more common in fantasy and sci-fi, and it's beginning to grind my gears more and more. Why Peter Quill has the humor of someone who actually went through high school on Earth, I have no idea. Insert MCU fan commenting the explanation given some Marvel novel that I'm not gonna read ever. But yeah, this is gonna be a C. There are more types of humor than millennial 20th century humor. The New World trope, and I chose a relic of the olden times, New World, the game from Amazon that already crashed and burned, it seems. I'm kidding, it could make a comeback, but I doubt it. As the representation of discovering new worlds, cultures, magics, whatever. And I agree with the person that this is an instant S tier. It's so fun. I love going in and exploring along with the characters something that is totally alien to them. It's not something you automatically get in most sci-fi or fantasy stories, and it actually helps narratively convey a lot of the information more smoothly without feeling like you're just doing massive explanation dumps, because the characters are naturally going to be asking about this stuff as well. It's part of the reason why my third book in the Lawful Time series, which is kind of on hold right now because I'm working on a sci-fi book instead, but that's a thing for another day, is doing this because I find it to be so enjoyable, not only as a reader, but also a writer. The misuse or underuse of certain sci-fi technology, oh my lord, this is a problem. Obviously, this goes into D. It is one of the worst things a author or writer of any kind can put into their world, and I hate it. I think one of the best examples of this being avoided and accidentally done can be pulled from older Star Trek. Very often, older Star Trek really thought through its technology and would totally implement how a 3D printer that could handle organic, materials would revolutionize society. It's completely woven into every element of the story in certain times. But then there's other stories from Star Trek where like they just cure aging completely and they never bring that up again. They're like, hey, we figured out how to stop aging, but yeah, it was only relevant for this episode. We're not going to bring that up. What? You've made immortals. Why is this not being talked about more? Always pulls me out of the story, and if you realize it in like a rewatch or hindsight, it can destroy something you once loved. So this is awful. The progression of mankind into the next level, a sci-fi trope you can see in things like Childhood's End to Battlestar Galactica. It is usually handled pretty well, and usually pretty gosh darn fun. I'm going to put it in the A tier. I have seen this mishandled, especially when it comes to like cybernetic enhancement to humankind, where the technology just feels disjointed from the world around it, and it often gets tied into wider world building elements that fail to be as fleshed out as I find they need to be. But that's not the majority of the time. And I think overall, if an author's going to tackle evolving mankind into the next stage of our evolution, they're usually aware of the amount of baggage that's going to bring as a writer, and they try to address it the best they can. So it's not something I see mishandled as often as a lot of other tropes, and so I usually get pretty excited for it. Sciencing the shit out of a situation. Great in sci-fi and controversial opinion, great in fantasy, which can incorporate it well, because if you have a very science-based magic system, doing something fun and interesting that meets the logic you have presented in that magic system, I consider to be the same thing. You have successfully, in your writing, scienced the science you made for your magic. And I like that a lot. And this even being attempted usually means you're gonna have an author who is thinking a lot about the smaller details of the world. So I actually see it as a sign that the rest of the narrative is going to be kind of thought through very meticulously. It's actually a way you can, well, spoiling some stuff for me, get me very interested to read a book or series. If you tell me that the author often sciences the crap out of stuff. It's one of my big pitches for the Bobverse. Ruins of a dead civilization being at the forefront of a narrative. Someone brought this up in the Twitter replies, and yeah, it's just a great atmospheric choice that I am a big fat fan of. I get a lot of people are gonna say like, Danny got a lot of stuff in S tier. Yeah, I'm a fan of these genres. I really like a lot of the stuff these genres do. But that being said, the sudden power-up is incredibly stupid, and it's always going to make me mark down your book about 3 points as a whole. I'm going to leave this big in the D tier because it's such a goddamn problem, it's so prevalent, and it's so dumb. If you just randomly power up your protagonist so that they can deal with either an antagonist that's just been set up to be far above what they're already at, or just an obstacle that you could cleverly think your way around, but instead you decide to just brute force them through it, I'm going to actually respect you as an author less because this is so lazy. Granted, if you do a very well set up power up moment, I'll excuse it, but I have a hard time of thinking of many examples of those. Mind control. I put this one in here because I thought it was interesting to see someone rank it so low, and it made me think about narrative times when I have seen mind control brought into the page. And I tried to think about how many of the times have I liked it versus not. And I actually felt surprisingly conflicted on it. Mind control can be pretty annoying, and it kind of is like time travel in a way, where as soon as you introduce it, your reader's gonna be asking, okay, you can control people's minds. Why don't you make them do this, that, this, that? Why didn't you control them? Why are you only controlling this person at this time? What are the limitations? It's a very big Pandora's box. And for that reason, I'm going to put it in the middle of the road because I think it's just really risky. And the final trope I'm going to talk about is one that has exploded in popularity recently, and that is going to be the protagonists going against each other who are not either necessarily wrong, basically being a very big bad and two people going about different routes of solving the problem that they morally conflict on. And I can think of no better example of this than a movie that is not sci-fi or fantasy, but Prisoners, directed by Denis Villeneuve. This is an absolutely exquisite example of this, and I'm just using this excuse to recommend, if you haven't seen Prisoners, my God, watch it. One of the best thrillers I've ever seen, and I genuinely really like this. Once again, if you're putting this level of thought in your morality, I am going to be a fan, and this is going to be a solid B to A for me, because there are some times where the answers are so obviously one-sided that it feels underdeveloped, and that can really pull me out. So I don't always feel super hot when I see this narrative start to emerge, though I can usually pretty quickly tell if it's going to be handled well or poorly, because there's always that establishment of sides early on. So yeah, it's going to be in that B to A where it usually has me go, oh, but then I can start seeing some red flags and go, oh. But this has been your latest trope favorites and least favorites tier list. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. I brought that Cuban thinking I was going to do something with it, and I just didn't. And like and subscribe if you have not already. Books, Patreon, merch, and have a good one, y'all. Peace.